Welcome to ETF Explained, a series on the Get Started Investing podcast. Each episode we explain one ETF to help you understand it and to help you build the skills to analyze any ETF. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. We got a request to do a specific ETF Explained in from Harry.
Hey guys, my name's Harry. Big fan of the show. Was just hoping you could do an ETF Explained for ticker VTS, which is Vanguard U.S. Total Market Shares Index ETF. From what I can find, it's had 15.8% return since inception in 2009 with a 0.03% management fee. Seems too good to be true to have such good returns over such a long period, so just wanted to know, what am I missing? Would love for you guys to explain before I go ahead and invest. Thanks in advance.
All right, Harry. Well, thank you for your question. Remember, if you want to submit a question, you can. The link is in the show notes and the YouTube description. We love it if you record your question rather than write it in. But Bryce, VTS, Vanguard U.S. Total Market Shares Index ETF.
Yes, ticker VTS.
Let's start with the name. What can we learn?
Let's start with Vanguard. That is the product issuer, one of the largest product issuers in the world. That's the first thing we can have a look at.
Yes.
Second thing is US Total Market Shares Index. So US, that's the geographic exposure I'm getting.
Yep.
Total market shares tells me two things. I'm getting a lot of shares. I'm getting exposure to the total US market, and it's the asset class is stocks.
Yep.
It's shares. And in terms of the type of ETF, index is a giveaway. It's a passive investing approach here. We're not talking about an active ETF.
Yeah. Love it.
So you can get a fair bit from the name, as we always talk about.
Yeah, it's pretty descriptive there. Now, once we look at the name and we glean what we can from that, the most valuable place you can go to learn about any ETF is the ETF issuer's website. And that is because they have obligations, like regulatory obligations, to make a whole bunch of information public and for it to be accurate. So you can go on their website and learn a lot. And that's where we go next, and we look at the ETF's purpose. So according to the Vanguard website, this ETF seeks to track the performance of the CRSP US Total Market Index, providing investors with exposure to a broadly diversified collection of securities that in aggregate approximates the full index in terms of key characteristics. A bit of jargon there, but really what you need to know is this is an index that gives you the full US market, all listed US shares.
That's it.
And if we look further down the Vanguard website, we can see that it has just shy of 4,000 companies in the ETF. Sounds like all of the US.
Too easy. One trade, 4,000 US companies.
Yeah.
What more do you want?
The rest of the world outside the US.
True.
Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned it there earlier, Ren, but it is worth pointing out you need to be considerate of what index or benchmarks it's tracking. And you did say CRSP US Total Market Index.
So that's the index it tracks. The next thing we want to ask is the fees, and we want to understand what we have to pay to get access to this index.
Very cheap.
Okay.
0.03% or 3 cents for every $100 that you invest. It is one of the lowest of all the ETFs that we've done on this segment. In fact, I can't think of a cheaper one.
Yeah, so
0.03.
So A200 is 0.04, isn't it? The Beta Shares ASX 200 or
Yeah.
A200. iShares IVV, is that 0.04 as well?
If not 0.05, yeah.
Yeah, okay. IOZ is 0.05. So yeah, off the top of my head, I think you might be right. I can't think of one that is lower.
No. So Harry noted in his question the performance of this ETF.
Yes.
So let's take a look after fees. Over the last 12 months, we've had 25 or just shy of 26%. 5 years, it's done just shy of 15% every year for 5 years. 10 years, Again, just over 15% every year for 10 years. And since inception, since 2009, 15.42% every year.
Nice. Put that into a compound interest calculator over 30 or 40 years and you'll be very happy with the results.
Absolutely. So it is not too good to be true. It's the reality.
Yes. So the question becomes, what has driven that performance? What has given us 15% a year over the past more than 10 years, really? And no prizes for guessing. If we're talking about the US total market, there's been one big story over the past 10 years in the US.
US tech.
Big tech.
Yes.
It's big tech getting bigger, big tech eating the world, big tech making investors very happy. And if we look at this ETF, no surprises. It's Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, Meta, Alphabet, and then we get into non-tech after that. Then we get Berkshire Hathaway, Eli Lilly, the other class of Alphabet shares, and Broadcom. So the biggest US listed companies, as you would expect.
As you would expect. Weighting's quite small, as you would also expect, because you're spreading that across 3,600 other companies. Ren, importantly, we need to figure out, where does this fit in a portfolio?
Yeah, so according to Vanguard, it's a long-term holding designed for people who want broad exposure to the US top-performing companies. It's built to be like a core long-term holding.
Yeah.
And I think as we've gone through the questions today, you can really see it is true to label. It is that long-term index product.
Yes.
But that really leads to the question that I think a lot of people have when they're looking at this ETF, which is, should I be looking at this total US market ETF, or should I be looking at an S&P 500 ETF, which tracks an index of the 500 largest companies? So let's answer that question.
All right. So we're going to compare it to the iShares Core S&P 500 ETF, another very popular one. IVV is the ticker. Now, it has fees of 0.04%, slightly more expensive, but nothing to worry about,
Yeah,
in
literally
my opinion.
one cent more for
Yeah.
every $100 invested.
Wouldn't worry about it. Interestingly, the average returns for IVV over the last year, just over 26%. For the last 5 years, 15% per annum. And for the last 10 years, 15.8% per annum. A reminder, the VTS did 15.43.
Yes,
So
yeah.
bang on.
No, not bang on.
Well.
That's over
0.4 different.
Over the 1 year period, it did about 0.6% better. Over the 5 year period, it did about half a percentage point a year better. And then over the 10 year, it did about 0.4% a year better. And that is the difference. That slight outperformance of the S&P 500 over the US total market is because the S&P 500 is slightly more concentrated. So you get slightly more of those mega cap technology names, those magnificent 7 names. Now, to put that in context, to give you an idea, in IVV, in the S&P 500, Apple is 7%. Whereas in the VTS, the ETF we're looking at today, it's 6.1%. In IVV, Nvidia is 6.7%. In this ETF, Nvidia is 5.1%. Now, the reason is because you're splitting the percentages, the weighting across 500 names in the S&P 500 and 3,600 names in this VTS. So it means that the S&P 500 is slightly more concentrated. And because these mega technology companies have done better and you have slightly more of them, that ETF has done better.
Yeah.
Let's answer the question.
Yeah.
S&P 500 or US total market if you're building your core portfolio.
I'm taking the S&P 500 any day of the week.
Why is that?
The thinking would be, going the 3,600 companies, you're more diversified, it's going to be safer, blah, blah, blah. We've disproven that. Like, the returns are very, very similar. And we know that the returns for the market are actually driven by not only the top 500 companies, but the top 6.
Yeah.
So you don't actually need those 3,100 remaining companies. And if you're worried about missing them as they grow and come up through the index, by holding the 500 top companies,
Yeah.
you're guaranteed you're always going to have the top 500
Yeah.
companies. So for me, nothing wrong with VTS, I should say, but for me, I'd just be choosing S&P 500.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. Well, Harry, to close this episode out and to answer your question directly, you asked, what are you missing?
You're missing the returns if you're not invested.
Yeah. But look, you're not missing anything. It's not too good to be true. It's just why we are bang on about investing so much and why we talk about the index and the returns from the index being enough for most people in most situations. It's because the indexes have been so powerful and delivered such great returns that you can just invest in the index and get on with your life. But I think VTS or IVV, S&P 500 or US total market, there's no bad choices. Both have delivered great returns. Both are built very similarly. Like they've got similar holdings. They track similar indexes. They'll be rebalanced quarterly. They'll achieve similar returns over time. So I think there's no bad choices here. The only bad choice is not investing. And I think whichever one you choose, just pick and stick and dollar cost average and keep trying to invest more as you earn more and you save more.
That's it. Well, if you have an ETF that you want us to cover, we love hearing from you. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment below on which ETF for us to do next. Otherwise, we'd love to get a voice note from you, so there'll be a link in the show notes. But Ren, that brings us to the end of today's ETF Explained. We'll be back with another episode.
Sounds good.